Hey everyone, Mike here in the BFH Garage. Today I'm going to cover a topic that isn't sexy like suspension or say big tires, but it is an important topic nonetheless. Today I'm talking about these little guys right here, frame rail nutserts and the tools you use to set them. So why do I think these little guys right here are important? It's pretty simple. They hold up the backside of your drivetrain. So if you have any compromise in any of your nutserts, you're going to have some pretty major problems down the road. Okay, so here's what we're talking about. You have your skid plate here, and what holds it up are these bolts right here. Between the frame rail and the skid plate, you're going to have a nutsert. It's that thin washer-looking thing in there, and that tucks up inside the frame. It crimps, and it comes back down and holds in place. So I'm going to give you three scenarios and how they typically play out. The first one is, let's say you want to drop your skid plate so you can do some routine maintenance, maybe change out a transmission mount or change out your exhaust. You go to undo the bolt, and due to corrosion, it strips out the nutsert. And so your bolt comes out, but when you go to put it back, the nutsert's stripped out and the bolt won't take. Scenario number two is, let's say you get all the bolts out, you get your skid plate dropped, you do your maintenance, but when you go to put it back in, you over tighten the bolt and again, strip out the nutsert. Another very common one is after you've stripped them out the first time and you order a new set of nutserts, when you go to set them, you strip them out as you're trying to set them because they take such a high torque load. And that's kind of why we're here today. I want to talk about the nutsert setting tools, the ones we've used in the past and the ones I use now, and the difference between them. And you're going to see an amazing difference from old style to new style. I just want to quickly talk about the nutserts themselves. So the nutsert kits that I buy come directly from Blackmagic Brakes, and you can go there and buy them for your application at blackmagicbrakes.com. Go on the website. They sell all sorts of good stuff there. But the nutserts that they sell are actual OEM nutserts. They buy overruns from the company that sells them to the factory, and you know you're going to get a high quality nutsert, and they are coated with zinc for a little bit of corrosion protection. Now you need to be aware that there's some other companies, for example, you go on eBay and buy a nutsert pack for just about the same price as you can get the standard OEM ones, but they're either going to require you to drill a little bit bigger hole or the nutsert itself is inferior. If you go online, you can see all sorts of videos of people installing nutserts that are not designed for that application. You can see how they crimp down and they split in all four corners, kind of like a wall anchor, and they're not designed to hold the same way that the OEM nutsert does. So just use caution when you're buying your nutserts, and again, I highly recommend the Blackmagic Brakes one. Can't go wrong with OEM nutserts. So now I'd like to talk about the Nutsert tools themselves. Most of the homemade versions, if not all of them, what they do is they rely on turning the bolt, which in turn turns the threads, which engages the nutsert, and then what it does is it pulls the nutsert collapsible portion down until it crimps. The problem with that is you're turning threads, it requires a pretty high amount of force in order to get it to turn. In fact, with the ones I've used up here, practice setting them, the amount of force it takes is so great that I actually have to get a cheater bar to finish getting them set. The downside of that is it's very difficult to tell when they're truly set. I'm tightening, and next thing I know, they're either set or they're stripped out. So what people will do is they'll take and they'll put anti-seize on the threads of their nutsert tool to make it easier to turn. The problem with that is it reduces the amount of friction, but it absolutely narrows the window down of when the nutsert is set versus when you're over torqued. So I have a simulated frame rail here, and it's easy for me to look over the side and see if I'm set or not. When it's inside your Jeep frame rail, you're not going to be able to see that and know if you got a good crimp or not. So maybe you do, maybe you don't. This new tool stops all of that. Now, why is the new tool so much better than the old tool? Yes, you can get the job done with the old tool. Maybe you know, maybe you don't. That's the problem with it. Or they're easy to strip out. And if you strip it out, then you're waiting on more nutserts to come in the mail before you can make your repairs. So the old school, again, has to use a serrated edge to clamp down on top of the nutsert to keep it from spinning, and then you turn the bolt itself to engage the threads, and that's what pulls your nutsert and collapses it. Very difficult to get right every time. This new tool uses a bearing, and the way this bearing works is it sits directly on top of the nutsert, just like that. You thread in the bolt, and then what you do is you put a wrench on top of the bolt, and then you turn the nut itself. So with the new tool, the threads are not turning inside the nutsert, so it doesn't take that amount of force like these do to get the nutsert set. The way this one works is you hold the bolt head itself right here, and then you tighten the nut, and as you do that, it pulls the nutsert and collapses it until it crimps onto your frame rail. And it is very, very difficult. In fact, I've tried to strip it out. You're not going to strip it out anywhere near as easily with this tool as you can with this one. And the one thing about this tool is it gives you a perfect crimp every time. You don't have to worry about, well, is it kind of on, is it kind of not? It sets it and you're done. It is a very, very cool tool. Let's take a little bit closer look at it. So here's a quick look at the tools. This is the old version that you had to grind in a bunch of slots in hopes that it would hold the nutsert and not spin in place. That's pretty fun. I'm sitting here looking at it right now. And from the last time that anti-seize was used on it, you can see where the last nutsert stripped out. I just found that. That's pretty funny. But that goes to show you how easy it is to strip out a nutsert. Right there's threads from one. Look at that. So the new tool keeps all that from happening, and here's how. So what you have your standard bolt and a nut that actually goes to the bolt here. You place on a washer, then you have a bearing here, and if you look at the bearing, you have a cone side, and here you have the cup side that's folded over. This flat side here goes against the nutsert, so you want to put it onto the bolt like this, and then your nutsert goes on, and then this pushes up against the nutsert. So the flat spot stays even with the nutsert. It's the bearing itself that turns. So the way to set this then is to take a wrench and hold the bolt head in place here, and then you start tightening the nut. And then it drives the nutsert that way until it is completely crimped. It takes a ton less force to get that crimp going. I can do it by hand, where with the other tool, I have to get out a breaker bar to make that work. So let me show you how this thing works. Okay, so I have the camera angle set so you can watch the crimp occur. At the same time, you're going to watch and see what it takes to get this thing started, which is not a whole lot. So you want to take a ratcheting box in, first of all, put that over the bolt onto the nut. Then you're going to take another box in and put it over the bolt. And all you're going to do is start tightening the ratchet. You're going to leave the bolt box end wrench in place. It takes just a little bit to get it started, but once it grabs, it is easy to tighten it up. And you go until you feel some pretty good resistance. And you could probably even take a little bit more than that, and it won't strip out. I've tried. Now I feel the resistance. I give it a good tightening just to make sure. Pop the wrench off. And you have a perfectly set nutsert. The really nice thing about the tool is you get good, consistent, repeatable results every single time. There's no worry of whether or not you have a nutsert set correctly or not. It does it right every time. Okay, the last topic I want to cover is how to remove a stripped out nutsert or one that's spinning inside the frame rail. There's a couple ways to do this. If it's spinning inside the frame rail, then you're going to have to take a grinder and put a crisscross pattern on the nutsert without going into your frame. So you're going to take a grind this way, you're going to want to take a grinder this way, then you're going to take it this way, kind of like tic-tac-toe. You do that, those edges fall off, and then you can take a cold chisel, punch in the corners, and then pop it back up and inside your frame rail. Now, if the nutsert's stripped, but it's not spinning in the frame rail, then another option is to just take a drill, a 5/8 drill, and drill it out like this. It falls down inside your frame rail, and then you just have to get a magnet or something like that to get it out of your frame rail. So that way works pretty quick, it's pretty reliable, and fairly straightforward. Hopefully this was an informative video for you. Hope you learned something about nutserts and the nutsert setting tools. I can't say enough about the new design using the bearing. It makes it stupid simple to get these things set. And there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever when I set one that I know it's set correctly. The crimp is perfect every time. I have the luxury of being able to look inside this frame rail where if it was on my Jeep, I wouldn't. So it's nice to see it in action here and know that I'll have it set right every time. So hopefully this helped you out.